I'm Mike Cartner with John W. Sproutlin & Son out of Lincoln, Georgia. I'm the contractor for the historic renovation of the Brick Store Stagecoach Museum in Social Circle, Georgia, which is right here behind me, built in 1821. It's a renovation project that is intended to stabilize the building from further deterioration so that in the future it can be used as a museum. Basically what we got going on is a general rehabilitation of the exterior of the building, where we're replacing any rotten pine boards in the gable, soffit, and fascia. It was pretty much all rotten, so we're replacing all that. We're coming back and repointing up all the brick and trying to make it look original with some penciling, which is some white lines done with a chalk pencil in the mortar joints that was typical of the period. We're going to be adding heat and air to the entire building, again, to keep the building from deteriorating further and making sure we're not getting any water into the cellar portion of the building, so the wood will stabilize and won't rot or deteriorate any further. We're going to be replacing any interior structural boards that are perceived to be structurally compromised, as well as refinishing all the wood.
Okay, and generally what kind of condition did you find the structure in when you started?
Considering that it was 190 years old, it was in pretty good condition. Structurally it's sound. The architect, Ben Carter, informed us that the building had burned previously, so the wood parts of the building are not original, but the brick walls seem to be structurally sound and fairly solid. It's got, as you can see, a masonry foundation, which is basically rocks stacked in cement, that's very strong.
And why are y'all using regular wood as opposed to pressure treated wood?
All that wood gets painted, so the paint will protect the finish on the soffits and fascia. Anytime we apply an exterior paint, that's typical. We are using in the historically underside of the building, we are using rough sawn pine lumber that'll get treated with an oil to protect the character of the wood. Obviously the boards, they didn't pressure treat wood back in the 1820s or any time near that time period, so we're trying to replicate things as closely as possible to the time period.
And what kind of paint finish will you be putting on that wood? How do you prepare it?
It'll be everything will be pressure washed and sanded down, all the existing wood, and it'll get an exterior grade, modern day paint. It'll be a latex based paint that'll protect the finish, and the colors have not been selected yet.
And do you put some kind of primer on the wood before you paint it? Or?
Usually the paints we use have a primer already in the paint, so it's not necessary. Usually they get 3 coats of paint with primer. So.
And how long does the paint expect to last?
Well over 20 years. So today's exterior grade paints. Here's the entry to the cellar or the crawl space. One thing that had been done previously in here is the old pine beams that were here originally had rotted out or burned in the fire, and they had gone back with concrete block or concrete masonry units to support the underside. So we're excavating everything out and putting in old rough sawn heart pine beams to support the first floor joist, and we're going to put a vapor barrier down to protect any moisture from getting into the cellar, and then we're going to pour concrete slabs so in the future people can walk around and see what the construction was. Likewise, any of the floor joists that are in the cellar that have compromised spots or rotted out spots will be taken out, or what we call sistered, putting one on each side of the joist, and to make sure they remain structurally sound. And this door frame will be rebuilt, and it'll be all brand new. It had some minimal termite damage to it.
And so with the wood that you're putting in, you said it's heart pine wood?
It's all heart pine rough sawn lumber, meaning it's not planed down. It'll have a rough finish to it, just like the hand planed wood did in the 1800s.
And do you have to get that special place?
I do. Well, I get it through normal vendors, but it's special order lumber because you have to get it all kiln dried, so that once it's put in, today's lumber is very wet. And if you don't get it kiln dried, once you put it in, it'll shrink and warp and twist and crack.
What was the problem with the support beams that were in there previously?
They just weren't proper for the time period. They were concrete masonry block, which is something that's been done since the mid-1900s. Originally, these beams would have been, and I'll find one for you here in a minute, but originally these beams would have been hand-planed pine lumber. So just trying to take it back to the time period to make it as historically correct as we can.
And why is that important?
Well, obviously in a historical renovation, one of the goals is to maintain as much historical character as we can. This is, my understanding, is the oldest building in Newton County. And so just trying to hang on to as many historical buildings in the area as we can. So this is one of the beams that was original in the building. It was supporting the underside of the first floor. It's obviously a hand plane beam that had been encapsulated by the CMU piers that were there. One of the reasons they'd obviously re-supported it was rotten on the underside. We decided we wanted to reuse this beam, being that it is from the time period. So what we're going to do is actually saw off the rotten part of the beam and the top, and it'll be a newel post for the stairwell on the first floor. So it'll stay in the building. These bricks came out of the cellar. They're obviously original with the building. They're very, very brittle. A lot of the bricks in this time period were sun dried, and they're not as hard, and they're much more porous than the bricks are today that are kiln dried. But all these came out of that interior wall, and there's some holes in there that we'll take and patch these back. And if we need to, we'll take some modern day brick and put them behind these brick, and then so it'll be structurally sufficient, and then put these over top so that it'll look original.
So those came from the foundation of the building?
They did. They did right around these vents.
And when you put the when you're going to put with the new brick, will the new brick in some way replicate that as far as composition?
No, we'll find as close a match on brick aesthetically as we can, but it'll be a much harder, water-resistant brick, and we'll try to hide them as much as possible. That wall is several courses of brick thick, so we can put them on the inside and then stack these on the interior veneer to cover the new brick.
And why would they have built the wall that thick like that? 3 bricks deep, you said?
Well, yeah, it's at least 3, if not maybe 4 bricks down in the foundation. That was common at the time period, to build a structural brick wall that was it was a solid, 20-inch wall or so, and it was, I guess, perceived to carry the weight, structurally at the time. All right, so what we have here is the remnants of the old penciling of the brick joints, which was done. The brick joint was stricken flush with the brick, and then they took a limestone or a chalk pencil, and they drew these little white lines. It was a European style of architecture that was common in the time period. And what we'll be doing is we'll come back and make all the brick joints flush like this, and then we'll be restriking these penciling marks into the mortar joint to replicate what was going on. And then we'll cover the brick with a linseed oil, which was done also because, as I mentioned, the bricks were so porous. And the linseed oil will protect the bricks from moisture infiltration and help keep them structurally sound.
And they would have done that, they would have put linseed oil back originally?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you can catch up at the top, but the top, maybe 8 or 10 courses of brick are a little shinier than those below it. And according to the architect, that is where the soffit has protected the original coating of linseed oil the last time it was done. And when we get done, the entire building should look a little shinier and brighter. What we found is, one of the things that Carter Watkins wanted to protect was the foundational integrity. And one of the things you worry about in that rock foundation is moisture getting in there, because the cement in the days was not very strong. So you want to keep as much moisture away as possible. Being that this building actually situated very nicely, it's up on top of a hill, so all the water naturally drains away. These brick in the 70s look like they were done to catch the water falling off the roof and shed it away from the foundation. And what we found is they've actually, except in one spot, done a very good job of keeping the cellar dry. What we're going to do to make this a little better, in fact it'll be a lot better, is we're going to actually come back and put copper gutters.
You talked about earlier how you like to try to keep the historic aesthetic of the building. Would this building originally have some kind of system?
No, it wouldn't have had gutters in 1821, but it's a compromise, because you can put gutters on and protect the foundation, and the gutters can always be taken back off. But once the foundation's compromised because of water damage, it's very hard to ever restore that foundation properly. So it's a protective measure. It's a historical compromise. We'll make it look as time appropriate as we can. But no, there would have been no copper gutters originally. So basically, on the back side of the building, it kind of mimics the front. We've torn down the deck or porch that was here because it was not structurally sound, and we're going to put it'll be a modern day pressure treated deck. And one of the reasons we don't use rough sawn lumber on a historical replication like this is because people walking up and down the splinters would just be awful. So that's another compromise, and the treated deck will be there left to weather naturally. The windows on the second floor, those sashes that are in those windows were actually replaced, and I can show you how we know that from the inside. And they're not as historically accurate as we feel they should be. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take those sashes out and rebuild a replica window that's more historically appropriate.
And how do you determine what's historically appropriate?
Well, when we go to the inside, I'll show you. But the inside of those sashes has it's actually got a rounded edge that's routed out on all sides of those, and they certainly wouldn't. Everything was done by hand in the day. So what they would have had was a rough sawn sash that was it was cut square. So that's what we'll go back with. Basically, what these brick joints should look like originally. And what Carter Watkins has found is that they would have been flush like this, and that a lot of this stuff was touched up probably again during the 70s renovation. So what we'll do is we'll try and scrape as much of this out of here as we can without destroying the brick, and then repoint these areas so that they look like this, and then come back and pencil everything. Likewise, there's some areas, there's some more this is all Portland cement that was put back in here. There's some areas, I think they're on the front of the building, that are recessed. And these joints right here would never have been done like that in the time period.
What's wrong with the way they did that?
That joint's concave, as opposed to like these flush struck-in joints over here. You can also tell that the mortar of the time period, like it's very sandy and brittle, whereas this stuff is not nearly as particularly that. It's much harder. That's just basically cement. What you can see up here is we're taking out the rotten gable boards and replacing the compromised boards that have weathered over the years and are no longer any good. We'll then put those back with rough sawn lumber and refinish the whole thing with exterior paint. These doors will get rebuilt completely. And here's some of the beams that were with the chamfering. It's obviously a little different from the one outside, being that, and that's why I think that one beam may be original. This one's got some round nails in it, which are not per the time period either. All the nails back then were hand-cut square head nails. These are the actual original crawl space vents that were on the outside that went into the cellar. And because we're conditioning it, we cannot leave those vents open. So what we're going to do is we're going to, again, rebuild these out of rough sawn lumber, sand these down and paint them, and put them back in the building from the exterior. And then from behind the window, we'll put a piece of glass to keep the space conditioned, but keep the exterior looking like it would have looked during the period. This is where that beam that was outside that I was talking about, that's going to be the newel post. This is where it sat, and it was actually encapsulated in CMU, which is what they had done at some point. And if you look right here, you can see how these beams are notched, all by hand, which is just really amazing. What they've done here is they've taken this great big hand plane beam, and they obviously couldn't get it in here in one long piece. They may not have had the capacity to lift it, but they may not have had lumber that was long enough, but they've notched it and overlapped it and then put it right on the center column. And all this work would have been done by hand. And it's just, in an age of build it faster, better, cheaper, I mean, it's craftsmanship that is to be admired. So, and you can see here, if you want to talk about those brick outside, and one thing that's very interesting about this wall to me is how they would lay courses in opposite directions. So you have this course of brick, which is running from inside to outside, and then you have these courses of brick, which are running, along parallel to the wall, and then it switches up. This is the legs of the building, if you will, I guess, and it's what holds the entire building up, and it's a hand stacked stone foundation. And what we've actually found is that it actually isn't as deep as we would like to see it in modern days. This is dirt down here. So this would be the bottom level of the foundation. And what we worry about is if this dirt were to split off, the undermining of these rocks. So when we pour the slab in here, what we're going to do is we're going to bring the slab along and turn it up this wall, and there'll be a 12-inch concrete support wall to keep the bottom of this wall structurally sound. But I mean, you can see all these rocks would have been stacked by hand, flushed off with hand tools back in the 1800s. I mean, all this stuff would have been just hammer and chisel and back-breaking labor. But it's done meticulously. If you look down the wall, it looks straight, plumb.